Hello, everyone. Welcome to part three of the series, I Felt Heard. Listening that wins. Part one focused on creating the conditions where people feel safe enough to speak honestly. Part two explored what happens next, how trust forms when someone feels understood and begins sharing what really matters. Part three, listening that wins, is all about responsibility. Once someone trusts you enough to open up, what you do next matters tremendously. Listening protects that trust. When listening is done well, something very powerful happens. Conversations become clearer, decisions become easier, relationships deepen naturally. This session is about how listening sustains trust, especially when the stakes are high. So let me anchor where we are in this series. Part one was about safety, part two was about trust, part three is about what happens next, the responsibility of safety and trust. And I've learned this lesson in a place very different from a sales conversation. Over the past year, I've spent a lot of time with my ALS care team, neurologists, pulmonologists, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, nurses, my wife, my family, my friends. Some of those conversations are incredibly hard. When you're sitting in a room talking about your health, your future, and your family, you become very aware of how people listen. Some doctors move quickly to information and solutions. Others slow down. They ask questions. They pause. They make sure they truly understand what you are experiencing. And the difference is enormous. When someone listens deeply, you feel calmer. You feel respected. You feel like you're not alone in the situation. And that is what listening does. It changes it changes the emotional environment of the conversation. And the same thing happens in business. Listening determines whether that trust deepens or disappears. Most companies assume stalled deals or lost customers happen because of product gaps. Now, let's be honest, sometimes they do, but more often, the real reason is human. Customers disengage when they feel rushed. They disengage when they feel misunderstood. They disengage when conversations become transactional instead of collaborative. When someone says they didn't listen, they usually mean something deeper. They didn't feel understood. Listening well prevents that breakdown well before it ever begins. A customer once told me one group was very aggressive and kept trying to make me feel like their timeline for getting me sold was more important than my timeline to make a decision. Listening is not simply staying quiet while someone speaks. Prospects and customers feel listened to when they believe three things. Number one, you understand their problem as they define it. Number two, You respect their timeline. Number three, you care about reducing their risk. When those signals are present, resistance drops and conversations become collaborative. There are three different common types of listening. Transactional listening waits for an opening to speak. Diagnostic listening instead focuses on requirements and solutions. Relational listening goes a step further and much deeper. Relational listening seeks to understand the person behind the problem. Relational listening is where trust forms. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. Transactional listening is driven by urgency. Prospects and customers, the other person, they feel it immediately. Even when the sales rep is polite, the conversation begins to feel like a process instead of a partnership. Transactional listening makes people feel managed rather than understood, and trust begins to weaken. Diagnostic listening focuses on understanding the problem. It improves conversations. However, it can still miss something important: the emotional content behind the problem. People are not only solving technical issues, they're navigating pressure and risk. Without relational listening layered on top of it, conversations could still feel very cold. A customer recently evaluated multiple vendors when replacing their survey platform. Two vendors made that final list. Both solutions technically solved the problem. One vendor pushed urgency, they pushed timelines. They tried to move the decision forward quickly. The other vendor instead slowed down. They asked thoughtful questions. They listened carefully and respected the customer's process. The decision was not based on features, it was based on trust. Let me say that again. The decision was not based on features, it was based on trust. By the time the decision happened, the customer already knew who they were comfortable with. Listening had already decided the outcome. So, who's in these rooms where we are trying to help the other people feel heard? While this session is primarily geared towards account executives, account managers, and customer success managers, which is where I spent most of my career in a sales function, these concepts can absolutely apply to any department in any company. Several years ago, I led a large group of clinicians as they were finding, helping, and onboarding travel nurses to hospitals that spiked with COVID cases during the pandemic. These principles applied even more to those teams. They certainly apply to any conversation between a leader and their direct report, and quite frankly, between any two people in and outside of work. For account executives, listening removes pressure from closing. New business conversations are filled with uncertainty. Prospects are comparing vendors. They're weighing risk. They're thinking about what happens if the decision goes wrong, not only what it means for them, for their company, but also for them personally. So when an account executive listens well, the conversation changes. Instead of pushing a solution forward, the AE helps the customer think clearly about their situation. They listen for decision dynamics. Who is involved internally? What risks are being debated? What outcome actually matters to the organization? When an account executive truly understands those dynamics, something powerful happens. The conversation becomes collaborative. The prospect begins to see the account executive as a partner rather than a salesperson. And when that shift occurs, closing the deal becomes much easier. For account managers, listening means something a little bit different. Listening reveals opportunity. Expansion rarely happens because an account manager delivered a great pitch. It happens because the customer feels comfortable sharing what is not working. Great account managers listen for the smallest of signals, a workaround that should not exist, a process that takes longer than it should, a team that feels frustrated, but they haven't said anything yet. Those moments of friction represent opportunity. When account managers listen carefully, they uncover needs the customer themselves may not even realize can be solved. And expansion becomes natural rather than forced. Customer success managers often meet customers during very stressful moments. Something isn't working. Expectations were not met. A process broke down. Oftentimes, we become very protective of our product and our process, and thereby we become defensive. It's a very natural feeling, especially when you're passionate about your company, your solution, and what you have to offer. Ask a customer success manager. The instinct is to move quickly into solution mode, to defend yourself, your product, and your company. But customers, they usually need something first: validation. They need to know that the CSM understands the impact of what they're experiencing. When validation happens first, the emotional temperature drops. The customer feels supported instead of dismissed, and the conversation becomes constructive. Listening lowers tension, so progress becomes possible. Listening also plays a powerful role inside of teams. Earlier in my career, I learned this lesson the hard way as a leader. When someone on my team came to me with a problem, my instinct was to solve it immediately. It was only natural. I was already good at the job that they were doing. And honestly, I just wanted to help. And I thought that was my job: provide direction, provide coaching, provide answers. But I eventually realized something. When I moved too quickly into advice and solution mode, people stopped sharing the full story. They began editing what they told me. They protected themselves. The moment I slowed down and focused on understanding first, everything changed. People opened up. They shared what they were actually struggling with. Coaching landed differently because it came from partnership rather than evaluation. Great leaders do not rush to answers. They create space where their teams feel comfortable thinking out loud. The idea matters even more in our personal lives. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned about listening comes from my relationship with my wife, Grace. There have been many moments over the past year where life has been incredibly heavy for both of us. ALS changes the way you think about the future, it changes how you experience time. And in those moments, I've learned something really important. Sometimes the most powerful thing we could offer someone, sometimes the most powerful thing we could offer someone we love is not advice, it's presence, just sitting together, just listening, just acknowledging that something is hard. And now, when I look at our baby girl, Lizzie, I think about the same thing. The way we listen to the people we love shapes how safe they feel sharing their lives with us. Listening is not just a business skill, it's one of the most human things we could do for each other. Getting back to business, and specifically a sales function, listening is why pipeline is so important. Building an adequate pipeline allows the salesperson the safety to make decisions in the best interest of their prospects and their customers. You do not want them to feel like an account that needs to be closed before the end of the quarter. One of the fastest ways to break trust is to prioritize your own internal timelines over a prospect or customer's readiness to buy. They feel pressure immediately, and pressure creates resistance. Respect, instead, creates confidence. When they feel respected, decisions actually move faster. Patience creates momentum. So listening must be visible. Reflecting back what you hear signals respect. It shows the other person that their perspective truly matters. Phrases like, let me make sure I understand. What matters the most right now? Did I get that right? There are so many ways to show the other person that their perspective matters, that you are listening. These small moments of acknowledgement strengthen trust quickly. So, listening produces very measurable outcomes. Customers who feel heard, they decide faster. They negotiate less aggressively. They stay longer and they advocate more strongly. So, listening becomes a competitive advantage. When people feel respected and understood, decisions stop feeling risky. Our goal is not to persuade. Our goal is not persuasion. Our goal is clarity. And listening creates that clarity. And clarity makes decisions easier. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next installment of this series. I felt heard. Thank you and have a wonderful day.